first contact and the Queen's warning. Captain Ryan Wells tightened his grip on the control stick as his small exploration craft descended through the thick, purple clouds of an uncharted planet. Earth was running out of time, and this planet, with its dense atmosphere and strange energy readings, might hold the resources humanity desperately needed to survive. The ship's sensors beeped, alerting him to the proximity of the ground. A vast, rocky landscape stretched out below him, dotted with towering crystal-like structures that glowed faintly. As the ship touched down with a soft thud, Ryan exhaled. He was alone out here, but he had trained for this. Scouting missions were dangerous, but he had one job: find what Earth needed and bring it back. As the ramp of his ship lowered, Ryan stepped out, his boots crunching on the alien soil. The air was breathable, but it had an electric charge that made his skin tingle. The eerie silence was broken only by the occasional hum of the glowing crystals. He activated his scanner, looking for signs of useful resources. "Let's make this quick," he muttered to himself, sweeping the area with the scanner. Suddenly, the ground beneath him rumbled. Ryan froze. The vibrations grew stronger, and a low, resonant sound filled the air, almost like a deep voice calling out. He spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the plasma pistol strapped to his side. Before he could react, a sharp, commanding voice echoed around him, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Human, you do not belong here." Ryan's heart raced. "Who's there?" he called, trying to keep his voice steady. A figure emerged from the shadows of the towering crystals. She was unlike anything Ryan had ever seen, a tall, regal alien with shimmering silver skin that seemed to shift and ripple like liquid metal. Her eyes glowed with an intense golden light, and her presence was both mesmerizing and terrifying. She wore a crown-like structure on her head, and her flowing robe seemed to move on its own, as though alive. "I am Queen Xyrus, ruler of this realm," she said, her voice calm but laced with authority. "You have trespassed on sacred ground." Ryan took a step back, his hand hovering near his weapon. "I didn't mean to trespass. I'm just here to—" Silence. Xyrus raised her hand, and the ground beneath him trembled again. "Your kind has brought destruction to worlds before. I will not allow it here." Ryan hesitated. He wasn't here to fight, but the tension in the air was palpable. "Look, I don't want any trouble," he said carefully. "I'm just looking for resources to help my people. We're running out of time." The Queen's glowing eyes narrowed. "Your excuses mean nothing to me, human. Your presence here alone is an offense. I will warn you only once: touch me or my domain again, and you will regret it." Ryan felt a surge of defiance. He didn't come all this way to be scared off by threats, no matter how powerful she seemed. "I'm not here to harm anyone," he said, his voice firm. "If there's a way we can coexist." Before he could finish, his scanner beeped wildly. He glanced at the screen and saw strange energy spikes emanating from the Queen herself. Fascinated, he stepped closer without thinking. The reaction was immediate. A blinding flash of light erupted from the Queen's body, and Ryan was thrown backward, landing hard on the rocky ground. The air around her crackled with energy, and her voice boomed, louder and more furious than before. "I warned you, human," she roared. "You dare defy my warning? You have awakened forces beyond your understanding." Ryan groaned, struggling to his feet. His head was spinning, but he managed to focus on the Queen, whose golden eyes now blazed like twin suns. The ground beneath them began to crack, glowing with the same energy that surrounded her. What did I do?" he asked, his voice trembling. He hadn't meant to provoke her, but it was clear that something had been triggered. The Queen stepped closer, towering over him. "Your touch has awakened an ancient curse," she said, her voice now colder. "A curse meant to protect this planet from intruders like you. Now, the balance of my world is in jeopardy, and the blame lies with you." Ryan's mind raced. He had no idea what she was talking about, but the weight of her words sank in. He wasn't just dealing with an angry alien queen, he had unknowingly set something dangerous into motion. "What can I do to fix this?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. The queen's expression hardened. "Fix it? You, a mere human. You've already done enough damage. The forces you've unleashed cannot be so easily undone." The ground shook violently again, and Ryan struggled to stay on his feet. In the distance, he saw dark shapes rising into the sky, ships or creatures, he couldn't tell, but they were heading their way. The queen's voice softened, but it was no less menacing. "If you wish to live, human, you will follow my commands without question. Together, we might have a chance to stop what you have started." Ryan hesitated. He didn't trust her, but what choice did he have? The look in her glowing eyes told him that she wasn't lying. Whatever was coming, it was big, and it was his fault. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said finally. The queen nodded, though her expression remained grim. "Then prepare yourself, human. Your survival will not come easily." As the dark shapes loomed closer, Ryan realized this was only the beginning. The ancient curse unleashed. The air crackled with energy as Captain Ryan Wells followed Queen Xyrus into the depths of her glowing crystalline palace. Each step he took on the jagged, obsidian-like floor felt heavier than the last, as though the planet itself were trying to push him back. Ryan could feel her anger in every tense silence between her clipped commands. She hadn't spoken a word since she'd reluctantly agreed to let him try to help, but her glowing eyes glared at him like firebrands in the dim corridors. "Keep up," the queen commanded sharply, her tone cutting through the air like a blade. She moved with the elegance of a predator, her shimmering silver robe trailing behind her like liquid moonlight. Ryan kept his hand close to his plasma pistol, though he doubted it would do much against her if she decided to vaporize him on the spot. "I'm trying," he muttered, his breath shallow. He didn't know if it was the suffocating tension or the strange atmosphere of the planet, but his lungs felt heavy. "You could at least tell me what we're walking into." Xyrus stopped abruptly, spinning to face him. Her golden eyes flared, and the strange runes on the walls seemed to glow brighter in response. "What we're walking into, human, is the consequence of your arrogance," she said coldly. "You've awakened a curse my people have kept buried for eons, a curse meant to protect this planet from the greed of outsiders like you." Ryan exhaled sharply, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Look, I didn't come here to destroy your world, okay? I was just doing my job. I didn't know touching that weird glowing thing would." "Enough." Xyrus snapped, her voice reverberating through the cavern. "Ignorance is no excuse for recklessness. Now the Voidborn will awaken, and their hunger will consume everything in their path." "Voidborn?" Ryan asked, his brow furrowing. "What are they? Some kind of ancient monsters?" The queen didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned and continued walking, her steps quick and deliberate. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice quieter but no less intense. "They are worse than monsters. They are remnants of a war long forgotten, beings created from chaos and darkness. They were sealed away beneath this planet by my ancestors, bound by the energy you carelessly unleashed. And now, they stir." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. He'd expected to find resources, maybe deal with a hostile alien or two, but this was something else entirely. "Okay," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "So how do we stop them? You said it's my fault, so there's got to be something I can do." Xyrus stopped again, this time at the edge of a massive, circular chamber. The room was unlike anything Ryan had ever seen. The walls were lined with towering crystalline pillars, each one glowing faintly with a deep blue light. In the center of the room, a massive pedestal pulsed with energy, and above it hovered a sphere of shifting, dark mist that seemed to writhe and pulse like a living thing. "This is the heart of the curse," Xyrus said, gesturing to the sphere. "The seal that keeps the Voidborn trapped lies here. But your touch has weakened it. Ryan swallowed hard. So what do we do? Fix the seal. Strengthen it somehow. Xyrus let out a humorless laugh. If only it were that simple, she said. The seal is tied to your presence now. Your interference has bonded you to its energy. If we are to stop the Voidborn from fully awakening, you must harness the power of the seal and use it to rebind them. Ryan blinked. You're kidding, right? I'm not some ancient alien wizard, I'm just a guy trying to do his job. Your job, Xyrus said icily, has brought us to the brink of destruction. Whether you're ready or not, human, you are now part of this. Before Ryan could respond, the chamber shook violently, and the glowing pillars began to flicker. A deep, guttural roar echoed through the air, sending a shiver down Ryan's spine. They're waking up, Xyrus said, her voice tight with urgency. She turned to Ryan, her golden eyes blazing. We have no time to waste. Step forward and place your hands on the pedestal. Ryan hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to run, but the look in Xyrus's eyes told him there was no running from this. Taking a deep breath, he stepped up to the pedestal. The energy radiating from it was almost overwhelming, making his skin tingle and his heart race. Now what? He asked, his voice shaky. Focus, Xyrus commanded. Let the seal's energy flow into you, but do not let it consume you. It will test your willpower. If you fail, it will destroy you. Great, Ryan muttered under his breath. No pressure. As he placed his hands on the pedestal, a surge of energy shot through him like a lightning bolt. His vision blurred, and his mind was flooded with alien symbols and images he couldn't understand. He gritted his teeth, fighting to stay conscious as the energy threatened to tear him apart. In the distance, the roars grew louder, and the mist above the pedestal began to shift and expand. Ryan could feel the weight of the Queen's gaze on him, but he couldn't afford to look away from the swirling energy. You must hold on, Xyrus said, her voice urgent but steady. The fate of both our worlds depends on it. Ryan's vision cleared just enough to see the dark mist coalescing into a terrifying form, a massive, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. The Voidborn had arrived, and the fight for survival had only just begun. The first battle. The planet sky darkened as Ryan Wells stood at the edge of the ancient chamber, staring up at the alien ships descending like shadows against the faint light of the twin suns. The crystalline structures around them began to hum with a low, eerie resonance, as if the planet itself were warning them of the chaos to come. Queen Xyrus stood beside him, her silver skin glowing faintly in the dim light, her golden eyes fixed on the horizon. For the first time since Ryan had met her, there was a flicker of something other than disdain in her expression, something close to fear. They are here, she said, her voice steady but grim. Ryan adjusted the grip on his plasma pistol, his fingers twitching slightly. Who's they? The Voidborn? No, Xyrus replied, her gaze unwavering. They are scavengers, those who have waited for centuries to exploit the curse you have awakened. They are drawn to chaos like flies to carrion. And they will not stop until they have taken everything. Ryan's stomach tightened. Perfect. So now we're fighting scavengers and whatever those Voidborn things are. Your survival depends on your ability to fight, Xyrus said coldly, turning to him. Do not waste your energy on complaints. You wanted to prove yourself useful, now is your chance. Ryan opened his mouth to retort, but before he could, the first of the alien ships touched down with a deafening roar. The sleek, black craft unfolded like a mechanical spider, and from its belly poured a swarm of alien warriors clad in jagged, metallic armor. They carried weapons that glowed with a sickly green light, their movements swift and coordinated. Stay behind me, Xyrus commanded, stepping forward with a grace that belied her imposing presence. Ryan hesitated, then shook his head. I'm not just going to stand here while you... Before he could finish, Xyrus raised her hand, and a wave of energy rippled outward from her palm. The ground beneath the advancing scavengers erupted in a brilliant explosion of light and shards, sending several of them flying backward. Ryan blinked, momentarily stunned. Okay, that was impressive. The Queen didn't respond. She was already moving, her silver form blurring as she closed the distance between herself and the scavengers. Her movements were almost too fast for Ryan to follow, her flowing robe shimmering as she darted through the enemy ranks like a blade slicing through water. Ryan snapped out of his daze as one of the scavengers broke away from the group and charged toward him, its weapon glowing ominously. He raised his pistol and fired, the blue plasma bolt striking the alien in the chest and sending it sprawling to the ground. Guess I can still hold my own, Ryan muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The battle intensified, the air filled with the sounds of energy blasts and the crackling hum of alien technology. Ryan stayed low, firing at any scavenger that got too close. He couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Xyrus moved through the chaos, her attacks precise and devastating. But even as they fought, the scavengers kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. For every one they took down, two more seemed to appear. This isn't working. Ryan shouted over the noise, ducking behind a jagged piece of crystal as an energy bolt whizzed past his head. There's too many of them. Xyrus appeared beside him, her expression unyielding. We are not meant to win this battle, she said. We are meant to survive it. Great pep talk, Ryan said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Xyrus ignored him, her focus shifting to the horizon. The scavenger ships were beginning to regroup, their formations tightening. We must retreat to the inner sanctum, she said. The energy within will slow their advance. Retreat? That doesn't sound very queenly, Ryan said, firing another shot at an approaching scavenger. The sanctum is not a retreat, Xyrus snapped. It is a fortress. And it is our only chance to hold them off long enough to stop what you have unleashed. Ryan hesitated, but the look in her golden eyes left no room for argument. Fine, he said, rising to his feet. Lead the way. Xyrus turned and began to move, her pace quick and deliberate. Ryan followed, firing over his shoulder as they made their way toward the entrance of the inner sanctum. The scavengers were relentless, their weapons scorching the air around them, but the Queen's energy blasts kept them at bay long enough for the two of them to reach the massive, glowing doors of the sanctum. Xyrus raised her hands, and the runes etched into the doors flared to life. With a low rumble, the doors began to open, revealing a dark, pulsing chamber beyond. Inside, Xyrus ordered. Ryan didn't need to be told twice. He darted into the sanctum, the Queen following close behind. As soon as they were inside, the doors slammed shut, the runes dimming as the chamber sealed itself. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the sound of Ryan's heavy breathing. He turned to Xyrus, his expression a mix of exhaustion and frustration. Okay, he said, we're alive. Now what? Xyrus stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the center of the chamber, where a massive, glowing structure pulsed with energy. Now, she said, we prepare for the real battle. Ryan frowned. The real battle? What was that out there, a warm-up? The Queen's eyes glowed brighter, and her expression darkened. The scavengers were merely the first wave, she said. The Voidborn will come next. And when they do, this sanctum will either be our salvation, or our tomb. Ryan swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. Whatever was coming next, he wasn't sure he was ready for it. But ready or not, he was in it now. Journey to the Forbidden Chamber. The sanctum's dim glow flickered as Ryan Wells and Queen Xyrus stood before a massive, rune-covered gate. Unlike the other doors in the crystalline palace, this one pulsed with an ominous red light, as though warning them to turn back. The air was heavy, charged with energy that made Ryan's skin crawl. He had faced scavenger attacks and the Queen's wrath, but this door felt different. It felt alive. This is it? Ryan asked, breaking the silence. His voice sounded small against the vast, echoing chamber. Xyrus stepped forward, her silver robes trailing behind her. "This is the entrance to the forbidden chamber," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "What lies beyond has not been seen by my kind for centuries. It is where the heart of the curse resides, and where your trial begins." Ryan frowned, gripping his plasma pistol tightly. "Trial? You didn't say anything about a trial." Xyrus turned her golden eyes on him, and for the first time, there was something almost human in her expression. "Pity, perhaps. Or regret. The energy of the curse will test you," she said. "It will invade your mind, exploit your weaknesses, and force you to confront the darkest parts of yourself. Only by overcoming it can you hope to harness its power." Ryan let out a nervous laugh. "You're really good at the whole ominous warnings thing, you know that." Xyrus didn't smile. "This is not a joke, human. The curse is tied to you now. If you fail, it will consume you, and the Voidborn will be free to spread their destruction unchecked." Ryan swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. He glanced at the glowing gate again, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life by stepping onto this planet. "And you?" he asked. "What happens to you if I fail?" Xyrus looked away, her gaze distant. "If you fail, there will be nothing left of me or my people to care about." The tension in the air was suffocating, but before Ryan could say anything else, Xyrus raised her hands. The runes on the gate flared, and the door began to creak open, revealing a dark, twisting corridor beyond. The faint sound of whispers drifted out, like a chorus of voices just beyond hearing. Ryan shivered. Great. Creepy hallway full of ghost whispers. Exactly what I signed up for. "Stay close to me," Xyrus said, stepping through the gate. "The path is treacherous, and the chamber itself is full of traps designed to deter intruders." Ryan followed reluctantly, his boots crunching on the uneven ground. The walls of the corridor seemed to move, shifting and twisting as though alive. The whispers grew louder, forming fragmented words and phrases that made no sense. "Do you hear that?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Xyrus nodded. "The voices of those who have failed before you. They are a warning." Ryan's pulse quickened. Comforting. As they moved deeper into the corridor, the air grew colder, and the whispers gave way to strange, echoing sounds, like footsteps that didn't belong to either of them. Ryan glanced over his shoulder but saw nothing. "Are we alone?" he asked, his voice tense. "No," Xyrus said without looking back. "The chamber is guarded by the shades, remnants of the Voidborn's power. They will test your resolve before you reach the heart of the curse." Before Ryan could ask what that meant, the corridor widened into a vast cavern. Floating crystals hung in the air, their light casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the center of the room stood a towering statue of an alien figure, its hands outstretched as though offering something, or demanding it. "What now?" Ryan asked, his voice echoing in the cavern. Xyrus approached the statue, her expression unreadable. "The first test," she said. "The pedestal before the statue will reveal your deepest fear. You must face it without faltering." Ryan hesitated, eyeing the pedestal nervously. "What if my deepest fear is, dying horribly in an alien death trap?" Xyrus gave him a sharp look. "Then you will die horribly in an alien death trap." "Great," Ryan muttered, stepping forward. "Let's get this over with." As soon as his hand touched the pedestal, the cavern shifted. The floating crystals dimmed, and the shadows on the walls began to move. Ryan's surroundings melted away, replaced by a familiar scene, Earth, but not as he remembered it. The sky was dark, the cities in ruins, and the sound of distant screams filled the air. "No," he whispered, his chest tightening. "This isn't real." But it felt real. The acrid smell of smoke, the heat of flames licking at the edges of the ruins, it was all too vivid. And then he saw them, scavengers, towering over the ruins, dragging humans away in chains. Among the captives, he spotted faces he recognized, his crewmates, his family. "Ryan," a voice called, and he turned to see his sister, her face pale and streaked with dirt. "Help me." He tried to run toward her, but the ground cracked beneath his feet, and he fell into darkness. "Focus, human." Zyrus's voice cut through the illusion, sharp and commanding. "It is not real. The curse is trying to break you." Ryan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to remember where he was. The scene began to blur, the sounds fading. He was back in the cavern, his hand still on the pedestal. The statue's eyes glowed, and the pedestal hummed with energy. Ryan stepped back, breathing heavily. "Well done," Zyrus said, her tone softer than before. "You survived the first test. But the true challenge lies ahead." Ryan nodded, his jaw tight. He didn't know how much more of this he could take, but one thing was certain, there was no turning back now. Betrayal and revelation. The chamber was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the glowing crystals embedded in the walls. Ryan Wells stood in the center of the vast, circular room, staring at the alien console before him. The symbols etched into its surface pulsed with a faint golden light, inviting him to act, yet warning him of the consequences. Queen Zyrus stood a few paces behind him, her golden eyes fixed on the console with an expression Ryan couldn't quite read. Was it concern? Or something darker? "Is this it?" Ryan asked, breaking the silence. His voice echoed faintly in the cavernous space. "Is this where we fix everything?" Zyrus didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. "This is where the curse was born," she said at last. "And it is where it must be undone. But the path forward will not be as simple as you hope." Ryan raised an eyebrow, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "It's never simple with you, is it?" He muttered. "You always have another riddle, another warning. Maybe if you told me the whole truth for once, I'd actually know what I'm doing." Zyrus's gaze snapped to him, her golden eyes narrowing. "You think you deserve the truth, human? After what your kind has done to my people?" Ryan took a step back, caught off guard by the sudden venom in her tone. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice rising. "I didn't do anything to your people. I didn't even know your planet existed until a week ago." Zyrus's expression hardened, and she turned away, her shimmering silver skin catching the faint light of the crystals. "Your ignorance does not absolve you," she said coldly. "This is not the first time humans have set foot on my world. Long ago, your kind came here, seeking power they could not control. They awakened the curse, and when it began to destroy them, they fled, leaving my people to suffer the consequences." Ryan stared at her, his mind reeling. That can't be true," he said. "You're saying humans caused all of this? The curse, the Voidborn, everything?" Zyrus turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "The curse was sealed by my ancestors, but it was your kind who unleashed it. And now, it falls to you to put it right." Ryan's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to argue, to deny her accusations, but deep down, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that she might be telling the truth. Humanity's history was full of mistakes, of greed and recklessness. Why should this be any different? Before he could respond, the console emitted a sudden, high-pitched tone, and the symbols on its surface began to shift and rearrange. A holographic projection flickered to life above it, displaying a series of images, alien cities crumbling under the weight of the Voidborn's power, ships fleeing the planet, and, finally, a group of humans standing before the very same console. Ryan's breath caught in his throat as he recognized one of the figures in the projection. It was a man who looked almost exactly like him. "What the hell is this?" Ryan demanded, pointing at the hologram. Zyrus's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. It seems the curse has revealed more than I expected, she said softly. Ryan turned to her, his voice filled with anger and confusion. You knew about this, didn't you? You knew there was a connection between me and this place. I suspected, Zyrus admitted, her tone calm but guarded. But I did not know the full extent of it. The curse is tied to your bloodline, human. That is why you were able to awaken it, and why only you can stop it. Ryan's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what she was saying. If the man in the hologram was his ancestor, then his family had been involved in this mess from the very beginning. And now, centuries later, it was his responsibility to clean it up. But something about Zyrus's calm demeanor set off alarm bells in his mind. She had been too quick to shift the blame, too eager to push him toward the console. You're not telling me everything, Ryan said, his voice low and tense. Why do I get the feeling you've been planning this all along? Zyrus's expression didn't waver. I have done what was necessary to protect my people, she said. You are here because fate demands it. Whether you like it or not, you are the key to stopping the Voidborn. Ryan shook his head, his frustration boiling over. Fate? Is that what you're calling it? Or are you just using me to fix your problems? Before Zyrus could respond, the ground beneath them shook violently, and the chamber was suddenly filled with the sound of distant roars. The Voidborn were coming. There is no time for your doubts, human, Zyrus said, her voice sharp. If we do not act now, everything will be lost. Ryan hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to trust no one. But as the roars grew louder and the air around them grew colder, he realized he had no choice. Fine, he said, stepping toward the console. But if I find out you've been lying to me? Zyrus met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then you will have my life, if it is still worth anything. As Ryan placed his hands on the console, the room was bathed in a blinding light, and the symbols began to spin faster. The hologram flickered, revealing a final message left by the humans who had come before him. Beware those who offer their help, for their motives are not always pure. Ryan's heart sank as the words faded, leaving him with a single, chilling thought: who was the real enemy? The final conflict. The air crackled with tension as the sanctum trembled under the weight of the Voidborn's arrival. Shadows moved unnaturally across the walls, swirling like smoke given life. Ryan Wells stood near the heart of the forbidden chamber, his hands clenched around the glowing console that seemed both ancient and impossibly advanced. The Queen, her regal presence dimmed by exhaustion, stood beside him, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Hold the line, Zyrus said, her voice sharp but strained. The Voidborn will breach the outer sanctum at any moment. Ryan took a shaky breath, his body still tingling with the alien energy he had absorbed earlier. His connection to the console was growing stronger, but it was like trying to control a raging river with his bare hands. You're really calm for someone about to face the apocalypse, he muttered, more to himself than to her. The Queen shot him a sidelong glance, her face unreadable. I have lived my entire life preparing for this moment, she said. The difference now is that I must trust someone else to see it through. Ryan grimaced. Well, that makes two of us. Before either of them could say more, the room shuddered violently. The massive doors that had sealed the chamber groaned under pressure, and faint cracks of light appeared around their edges. Ryan could hear them now, the deep, guttural growls and the scraping of claws against stone. They're here, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Zyrus stepped forward, raising her hands. The crystalline pillars around the chamber flared to life, bathing the room in an ethereal light. Do not lose focus, human, she said without looking back. Your task is to stabilize the seal. I will handle the Voidborn. Ryan's eyes widened. You're going out there? Alone? The Queen turned to face him, her expression fierce. I have held them back for centuries. I can do it a little longer. Before Ryan could argue, the doors exploded inward, and the Voidborn poured into the chamber. They were monstrous, towering creatures of shadow and flame, their glowing red eyes fixed on the seal at the room's center. Their presence was suffocating, a palpable wave of fear and rage that threatened to overwhelm Ryan. Xyrus launched herself into the fray with a roar, her silver form blazing with energy. She moved with impossible speed, her strikes precise and devastating. The Voidborn howled as her attacks tore through their ranks, but for every one she felled, 2 more took its place. Ryan forced himself to look away from the battle, focusing instead on the console before him. The symbols had grown chaotic, spinning and rearranging themselves faster than he could follow. The alien energy surged through him, burning like fire in his veins. Come on, he muttered, his fingers flying over the console. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, but he could feel the seal responding to his touch, its power shifting and coalescing. Behind him, the battle raged on. Xyrus was a blur of light and motion, but even she was beginning to falter. The Voidborn were relentless, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm her. Ryan's heart pounded as a sudden realization hit him. The energy from the seal, it wasn't just meant to contain the Voidborn. It could also be used as a weapon. But doing so would come at a cost. Xyrus, he shouted over the chaos. The seal, it's connected to me. If I channel its energy, I can take them out. The queen glanced back at him, her golden eyes blazing. You will die if you do that, she shouted. Ryan's jaw tightened. I'll die if we don't. Xyrus hesitated, her gaze flicking between him and the horde of Voidborn. There is another way, she said finally. But it requires trust. Ryan frowned. What are you talking about? The queen stepped back toward him, her movements deliberate despite the chaos. The seal is tied to both our worlds, she said. If we combine our energies, we can amplify its power without destroying you. Ryan's stomach churned. Combine our energies? What does that even mean? It means you must allow me into your mind, Xyrus said, her tone grim. Our connection will be absolute. Your thoughts, your fears, everything will be shared. Ryan's instinct was to say no. The idea of someone, especially someone as dangerous as Xyrus, rooting around in his head was terrifying. But the Voidborn were closing in, and time was running out. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. Just, don't mess with my memories, okay? Xyrus placed her hands on his shoulders, her touch strangely warm. Brace yourself, human, she said softly. The connection was immediate. Ryan felt a surge of energy unlike anything he'd ever experienced. His mind was flooded with images, Xyrus's memories of her people, her battles, her sacrifices. He saw the horrors she had endured and the weight of her responsibility. At the same time, he felt her presence in his own thoughts, sifting through his doubts and fears like pages in a book. It is done, Xyrus said, her voice echoing in his mind. Now, focus. Together, they turned to the console, their combined energy coursing through it. The symbols aligned, and the seal flared to life, its golden light expanding outward in a blinding wave. The Voidborn screeched as the light engulfed them, their forms dissolving into nothingness. When the light faded, the chamber was silent. The Voidborn were gone, and the seal stood intact, its energy stabilizing once more. Ryan collapsed to his knees, his body trembling. Xyrus knelt beside him, her expression unreadable. You did well, human, she said quietly. Ryan looked up at her, his face pale but determined. Tell me this is over, he said. Xyrus's gaze flicked to the seal. For now, she said. But the Voidborn are only one threat. The greater danger lies in what we have yet to uncover. Ryan let out a weary laugh. Of course it does. As he struggled to his feet, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was still ahead. The Queen's sacrifice. The chamber was bathed in an eerie golden glow as the seal pulsed with energy, stabilizing but still fragile. Ryan Wells stood at its center, sweat dripping down his face as the weight of exhaustion pressed heavily on him. He could barely think, barely breathe, as the alien energy he'd harnessed threatened to consume him entirely. Queen Xyrus stood a few steps away, her glowing golden eyes fixed on the seal. Her regal composure was beginning to falter, the silver sheen of her skin dimmed, and her movements were slower than before. The battle with the Voidborn had drained her, but it was something more than fatigue, something she hadn't told him yet. "It's not enough, is it?" Ryan asked, his voice hoarse. He looked at the seal, its energy flickering unevenly. The Voidborn were gone, but the danger wasn't. He could feel the instability radiating from the seal, like a storm waiting to break. Xyrus didn't answer immediately. Her gaze remained locked on the glowing structure, and when she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with sorrow. "No," she said quietly. "The seal cannot hold on its own. Not for long." Ryan's chest tightened. "So, what do we do? There's got to be a way to fix it, right? Some kind of backup plan." Xyrus turned to him, and for the first time since they'd met, he saw the vulnerability in her eyes. "The seal was never meant to last forever," she said. "It requires a constant source of energy, life energy, to remain stable." Ryan blinked, confusion and dread twisting in his gut. "Life energy? What are you saying?" She stepped closer, her expression calm but resolute. "I must merge with the seal," she said. "My essence will bind it, ensuring its stability and protecting both our worlds. It is the only way." "No," the word escaped Ryan's lips before he could stop it. He shook his head, taking a step back. "There's got to be another way. You can't just throw your life away like that." Xyrus's gaze softened, and for the first time, her regal demeanor gave way to something almost human. "This has always been my destiny," she said. "From the moment I was chosen as queen, I knew it would end this way. My people entrusted me with their survival, and now, I entrust you to carry that legacy forward." Ryan's mind raced. He wanted to argue, to come up with a plan, but he could see the determination in her eyes. She had made her choice long before he had even stepped onto this cursed planet. "There's got to be another way," he said again, his voice cracking. "We've been through too much, you've fought too hard, for it to end like this." Xyrus placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. "Do not mourn me, Ryan Wells," she said. "I have lived a life of purpose, and my people will be free because of this sacrifice. But your journey is just beginning." Before he could respond, the chamber shook violently, and the seal began to destabilize once more. Xyrus turned toward it, her silver form glowing brighter as she stepped forward. "Wait!" Ryan called, his voice desperate. She paused, glancing back at him one last time. "Take this," she said, holding out a small, crystal-like shard that seemed to pulse with her own energy. "It is a fragment of the seal's power. With it, you will have the strength to protect your world, and perhaps, one day, to rebuild the connection between our peoples." Ryan hesitated, his hand trembling as he took the shard. "I don't know if I can do this without you," he admitted. "You can," she said simply. "You are stronger than you realize." With that, Xyrus turned back to the seal. She raised her hands, and her entire body began to glow, the light intensifying until it was almost blinding. The chamber was filled with a deep, resonant hum as her energy flowed into the seal, stabilizing it. Ryan watched, his chest tight, as her form became indistinct, merging with the light of the seal. The runes on the walls flared to life, their energy flowing into the seal like rivers converging into an ocean. And then, just like that, she was gone. The chamber fell silent, the seal now steady and pulsing with a calm, golden light. Ryan stood there for a long moment, staring at the place where Xyrus had stood, the shard she'd given him glowing faintly in his hand. He felt a surge of emotions, grief, anger, and a strange sense of purpose. He hadn't asked for this, but now he carried the weight of not just Earth's survival, but the legacy of a queen who had given everything to protect her people. As he turned to leave the chamber, the shard in his hand pulsed once, and he heard her voice, faint but clear, echo in his mind. "Live well, human. And remember what we fought for." Ryan stepped out into the dim light of the planet's surface, the weight of the shard and her words pressing heavily on him. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: he wouldn't let her sacrifice be in vain. Far above, the stars shimmered, and for the first time, Ryan felt like he understood what it meant to truly fight for something greater than himself.